Thousands of years ago, there are no bathrooms, no toilets, no toilet paper, no plumbing, and certainly no comfortable bathroom with a locked door. But there is one problem that every human has always faced. Sooner or later, nature calls. Today, we simply walk into a bathroom, sit down, flush, wash our hands, and move on with our lives. But what did ancient humans do when they needed to poop? Where did they go? How did they stay clean? And perhaps most importantly, how did they keep their living areas from becoming disgusting? The answer is surprisingly simple, but the story reveals a lot about how humans learned to live together. For most of human history, there was no such thing as a toilet. Early humans lived in small groups and moved frequently from one place to another. When someone needed to relieve themselves, they usually looked for a suitable place away from where people slept, ate, and collected water. A bush, a patch of soil, a rock, or an area farther from camp could become a temporary bathroom. There was no special construction required. You simply walked away from the living area, did what you needed to do, and returned. This sounds incredibly primitive to us, but there was an important advantage. Many early human groups were mobile. If a group moved to a new location regularly, waste did not have enough time to build up around the camp. Nature itself helped clean the environment. Rain, insects, bacteria, soil, and sunlight gradually broke down organic waste. In other words, humans did not need a flushing system because their lifestyle was completely different from ours. But as humans began living in larger and more permanent settlements, things became much more complicated. Imagine hundreds or even thousands of people living in one place. Suddenly, simply walking into the nearest bushes was not enough. Waste began accumulating around homes and paths. It could contaminate water sources, attract insects, produce unpleasant smells, and contribute to the spread of disease. This created a problem that humans eventually had to solve. How do you manage human waste when everyone stays in the same place? One of the earliest solutions was surprisingly obvious: dig a hole. A simple pit could be used as a toilet. Someone could dig a small hole in the ground, use it, and cover the waste with soil afterward. This was one of the most basic forms of waste management, and versions of this idea have existed in many cultures. Covering waste helped reduce the smell and made it less accessible to insects and animals. It also helped keep human waste away from areas where people lived and worked. But ancient humans did not all use the same method. Different environments required different solutions. People living in dry regions had different problems from people living near rivers or wetlands. People in cold climates faced different challenges from people living in warm climates. And once humans created cities, waste management became an even bigger engineering problem. Some ancient civilizations eventually built actual toilets and drainage systems. In certain settlements, people constructed places where waste could fall into pits or channels. In some sophisticated urban societies, wastewater was carried away through drains. These systems show that ancient people understood something extremely important. Human waste needed to be separated from drinking water and living spaces.
And this is where the story becomes much more interesting. You might think toilets were invented simply because ancient people wanted comfort, but the bigger reason was probably survival. Human waste can contain harmful microorganisms and parasites. If waste gets into drinking water, it can create serious health problems. Ancient people did not know about bacteria or viruses in the modern scientific sense, but they could observe the consequences. If a settlement became filthy, people became sick. If clean water was protected, communities could function better. So even without modern microbiology, humans slowly learned through experience that waste needed to go somewhere else. But what about cleaning themselves? This is another part of the story that sounds strange from a modern perspective. Toilet paper is a relatively recent convenience compared with the enormous length of human history. Ancient people used whatever materials were available in their environment. Depending on the culture and location, People could use water, leaves, grass, soft natural materials, or other suitable substances. Some societies developed specific practices for cleaning with water. Others relied on locally available materials. There was no universal ancient bathroom routine. What one group considered normal could be completely different from another group's habits. And there was another important difference: privacy. Today, going to the bathroom is usually considered a private activity. We close a door, lock it, and expect nobody to disturb us. But privacy itself is partly a cultural idea. Small hunter-gatherer groups may have had very different expectations about personal space. If someone simply walked away from camp behind a tree, there might not have been a formal concept of a bathroom at all. As communities became larger and houses became more permanent, privacy became easier to create and more necessary. Eventually, toilets became enclosed spaces rather than simply places somewhere outside the settlement. Some ancient toilets were surprisingly advanced. Archaeological discoveries have revealed evidence of toilets, drainage channels, cesspits, and sewer-like systems in several ancient societies. These discoveries challenge the idea that ancient people were simply dirty or careless. In reality, many communities were experimenting with practical ways to manage waste long before modern plumbing existed. Of course, ancient sanitation was far from perfect. Even impressive systems had weaknesses. Waste could still contaminate water. Drains could overflow. Cities could smell terrible. Parasites were common. And without modern sewage treatment, simply moving waste away did not necessarily make it harmless. Still, the basic principle was incredibly important: keep human waste away from humans. Think about how simple that idea sounds, yet it represents one of the most important changes in human settlement. Once people began living together in large numbers, waste management became part of civilization itself. The modern toilet is therefore not just a piece of bathroom furniture. It is the final result of thousands of years of experimentation. Humans went from walking away from camp to digging holes to building pits to constructing drainage systems and eventually to creating complex underground sewage networks.
So, how did ancient humans poop without toilets? Most of the time, they simply went somewhere away from where they lived. In mobile communities, nature handled much of the rest. As settlements became permanent, humans developed pits, designated areas, toilets, and drainage systems. The solutions were simple at first, but they gradually became more sophisticated as populations grew. And perhaps the strangest part is this: the problem itself has never changed. Thousands of years ago, a human being still had to answer the exact same biological call that you do today. The difference is that when you finish, you probably press a button, and several thousand years of human engineering take care of everything else. So, the next time you sit on a modern toilet and flush, remember that you're using the latest chapter of one of humanity's oldest problems. Because civilization wasn't built only around kings, pyramids, weapons, and great inventions. Sometimes civilization begins with a very simple question: where should we go when nature calls? And humans have been trying to answer that question ever since. Thanks for watching.